My name is Enrico Facco. I'm senior professor at the University of Padua. I'm specialist in anesthesiology and intensive care and in neurology, and spent over 20 years in neurointensive care to study coma, altered state of consciousness, and all disorder of consciousness up to the level of brain death. Now I'm working mainly in pain therapy and on the science of consciousness and non-ordinary mental expression. I've always been interested in what is non-conventional. In the 70s, I had an accident where I had a very small, very light experiences that belongs to that experiences, but it was too light to be considered as such. Then I read the first book by Moody Jr., and it was very appealing. Then I spent my life in working in intensive care of coma and all alteration of consciousness. And in year 2000, I started to read new literature about near-death experiences, and this started a new interest I've done until today. The problem is that NDEs, as well all subjective phenomena, belong to the world of subjectivity. And this means that they have deep, huge epistemological implications. For science has been devoted to the study of the physical world, but is not devoted to the inner world. And this implies that we have something to do in the field of epistemology to understand what we can know and in which way and what is most proper to be done. We need an enlargement of paradigm rather than a shift where the current scientific paradigm, reductionism, is surely a powerful method, but is blind to the world of subjectivity and cannot explain what pertains to consciousness and its non-ordinary expression. We need to join the first-person perspective, that is the subjectivity of experience, with the third-person perspective, that is the classic objectivist approach. Because we cannot understand anything if we do not enter the world, the inner world of the subject who have the experience. I think that there is a need to enlarge the paradigm, not to leave the old one, but to improve it, including what has been denied so far. The first is that the existence of a very clear consciousness when we should be inclined to think that it's not possible. And this is a first challenge to our current knowledge. The other is the possibility to report a veridical experience while apparently without consciousness. And so the so-called witnessed near-death experiences, or those who perceived things that they couldn't know. So this is very intriguing and calls for an explanation, and is very, very, very appealing as a topic. The problem is that usually patients tell you retrospectively. So you are not in the condition to demonstrate the truthfulness of what they realize. This is the reason why we have only a few well-documented, well-demonstrated witness experiences in literature, and I have several other cases that would be potentially verified, but I couldn't because it was past too much time from the first experience, and so I couldn't check the truthfulness of what they reported. But they were very, very appealing. Yes, I think they do. And of course, they hint to the possibility of a life after death, of the physical death. But this is a great challenge since the beginning of human culture, in all culture, in all times. So near-death experience, again, emphasize this great mystery of life and death. It is unsolvable, and probably we can solve each one at the moment of we die, and we can check what is real and now we cannot say. I like very much a sentence by Ibn Arabi, a great mystic Sufi of 13th century, that says that life is like a dream with open eyes. And you wake up from this dreaming at the moment of death. Just the opposite of what we think today. So, being a great mystery, whatever we think is a prejudice. We try to, in some way, to find some hints to explain what will happen, but we cannot have any certainty. So we must keep the deepest and more authentic philosophical perplexity in investigating the phenomena, in waiting for our moment. What I do believe is that we must proceed towards a transcultural, metaphilosophical approach to consciousness, to all what regards both the inner and outer world. We should move beyond the limited ethnocentric and chronocentric perspective that has been routinely used, because in this way we lose a lot of precious, wise information. I found in Eastern philosophies a lot of wisdom, and many times you find that they say just the opposite of what we think, and this is not less true, because life is very, very, very wide. We must consider all what we are not inclined to think because of our cultural filters. So at this moment I have not an example, but the idea that, for example, consciousness is part, a dimension, primary dimension of the universe, in its even slightest form, that may be also unconscious. I think it's a relevant thing, because even with science, we cannot know the world, the physical world as it is in itself. What we can get is our image of the world according to our sense organ and process of codification of the brain. This means that I like very much the model-dependent realism introduced by Hawkins and Mlodinov. That is, that science can provide only partial models predictive of reality. That is not the naive realism believing that we know the reality as it is in itself. So there are so many worlds as a sentient being. And for example, what is like to be a bat? The famous paper by Thomas Nagel. But whatever he perceives, whatever he do, whatever he think, is working and is perfectly adapted to the environment, like us. But we'll never know how it codifies the world and what perceives and how he lives it. So what is consciousness is absolutely private. We can understand only through communication by others. If now I close my eyes and do not answer to any kind of your stimulus, the only possible conclusion is that I'm comatose, unless I tell you what I'm doing with my mind. We must consider that consciousness is absolutely private. It's as an analogy with quantum physics, only an analogy, does not imply quantum mechanism, because particles cannot be observed, and when you observe them, they change or not, but you cannot know what they are before measuring. And the same is for consciousness. So we must shift also our paradigm to understand these things and do not fall into a naive realism.